Never play this game with your friends. Once there was a group of girls who heard about the game Baby Blue. They didn't believe in it but thought they could scare their friend Laura. So they sent Laura into a bathroom by herself. She turned off the lights, closed the door, and put her arms out as if to hold a baby. Then started chanting Baby Blue 13 times. What happened next cannot be explained. Laura felt a heavy weight in her arms. Then she felt the weight in her arms scratching her. She was terrified and didn't know what to do. She wanted to drop it, but she was afraid of what might happen if she did, so she froze, and the weight grew heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she saw a woman in the bathroom mirror with a twisted look on her face. She screamed in terror. When her friends heard her scream, they tried to open the door, but it was locked. When they finally opened the door, they found Laura on the floor. Her eyes had been scratched out. They tried to move her body, but they couldn't, because something large and invisible was pinning her to the ground.
So it's Friday night, it's Roxy's birthday weekend, and we're all going to her house for the first time ever for our group sleepover. So we get there, and honestly, everything seemed really normal at first. Roxy's house was really nice, and honestly, I was confused why she never wanted us there before. So then we start making banana bread, and all of a sudden, Laura jumps and screams and runs to the other side of the kitchen. She's like, "Did you guys feel that?" And we're all like, "What are you talking about, Laura?" She's like, "I swear something just touched my lower back." And Laura's face turned really pale, like she was genuinely scared. And we spend the next hour convincing her that no one was there, no one touched her back. So then we start watching a movie, Disturbia. Shout out to Shia LaBeouf. And Nina goes to the bathroom. And when she comes back, she's like, "Roxy, it looks like something upstairs is maybe leaking because there's this massive wet stain on your bathroom wall." And Roxy's like, "Oh, don't worry, that stain's always there." She's like, "We actually can't figure out where it's coming from. We've had plumbers come and they can't figure it out either. There's no drain or pipe or anything that could be causing a leak at that part of the house anyway." And then Roxy says, "But that's why we think our house is haunted." We all look at her kind of shocked, and she's like, "Yeah, that's why I never invited you guys to sleep over, because it can get kind of creepy." But honestly, at that point, I wasn't that creeped out until we went to bed, because that's when stuff started getting weird.
Once there was a girl named Jenny. She was like all the other girls except for one thing. She always wore a green ribbon around her neck. There was a boy named Alfred in her class. Alfred liked Jenny, and Jenny liked Alfred. One day he asked her, "Why do you wear that ribbon all the time?" "I cannot tell you," said Jenny. But Alfred kept asking, "Why do you wear it?" And Jenny would say, "It's not important." Jenny and Alfred grew up and fell in love. One day they got married. After their wedding, Alfred said, "Now that we're married, you must tell me why you have that green ribbon." "You must wait," said Jenny. "I will tell you when the right time comes." Years passed. Alfred and Jenny grew old. One day, Jenny became very sick. The doctor told her that she was dying. Jenny called Alfred to her side and said, "Now I can tell you about the green ribbon." She told him to untie it so he could see why. And Jenny's head fell off.
This is why you should always lock your doors. A junior in high school was home alone working on a paper while his parents were out to dinner. All night he sits with his back to his door, sitting at his desk with his noise-canceling headphones on. Around 11 o'clock he takes his headphones off at the same time his parents are returning to the house, and he hears his mom from downstairs yell, "Hey Adrian, what happened?" Confused, he runs downstairs and sees right away what she's looking at. Muddy footprints all over the rug. He tells her, "I didn't leave my desk." And then they realize someone must have broken in. They look at the footprints and there's none leaving the house. They're worried someone's still in the house, so they run into the garage, terrified, call the police. Police arrive and they don't find anyone in the house, but they do make a chilling discovery upstairs. The police bring them to the kid's bedroom door, which had been left open all night, and they point to the message written on it in Sharpie. This is the actual transcript of what was written on his door, which means for nearly 2 hours, someone stood in this kid's doorway watching him.
Long ago, there was a young, beautiful woman named Maria. She belonged to a poor family, but everybody in the village lusted after her. One day, as she was out for a walk, a rich nobleman spotted her and immediately fell in love with her. Fast forward a few years, they're married, they have 2 kids, and they're happy. That is until her husband started showing up later and later from work, until one day he didn't come home. Maria was heartbroken. Years later, however, as she was out for a walk with her sons, she spotted her husband with another woman. This sent her into a fit of rage. She was so angry she drowned her sons. And immediately after, she regretted it. She cried for her sons, but it was too late. She couldn't live with the guilt, so she drowned herself. However, her spirit remained on earth. She is now known as La Llorona. She has said to be seen walking along bodies of waters crying, looking for her lost sons. If you're out at night and you hear her cries, it's too late for you.
This is why you should never knock on a stranger's door. Once there was a man trying to check into a hotel. The woman at the front desk gave him his key and told him none of the guests are allowed to go into the room across the hall. He agreed, but as he continued to stay in the hotel, he grew more and more curious about the room he wasn't supposed to go in. At one point, he even walked down the hall to that room and tried the door. It was locked. Then he bent down and looked through the keyhole. He saw that it was just the same as his hotel room. But in the corner of the room, there was a woman whose skin was extremely pale, almost a sickly white. Her back was to the wall, so the man didn't see what she looked like. He almost knocked on the door, but then just decided to leave her alone. The next day, he walked past the door again and decided to look into the keyhole. This time, there was no hotel room and no woman. It was all just red. He thought that this seemed really strange, so he went to the front desk and asked about the room. After insisting on an answer, the woman at the front desk told him, "A long time ago, a man killed his wife in that room, and her ghost is still there. But these ghosts are not what you might imagine. They're completely white all over, except for their eyes, which are red."
This is why you never go to the well on your own. In 1983, a young boy was camping with his family on Roan Mountain in North Carolina when his mom asked him to head on down the path and get some water from the well. When the boy didn't return, his mom went to check on him and he was gone. A massive search party was launched to find him, but with temperatures rapidly dropping and finding no trace of him, the family braced for the worst. Then, miraculously, on the 7th day of the search, the boy shows up on the mountaintop in an area they had already searched, healthy and clean. When they asked the boy, "Where have you been?" he said he had been at the well when a tall, faceless man showed up behind him, scooped him up, and brought him to the top of the mountain where he kept him in his cabin all week. After the boy gave a very detailed description of exactly where this cabin was on the mountain, the police were eager to go find it and confront this guy. But the park superintendent just raised his hand and said, "Guys, it's pointless. I've worked here 40 years. There are no cabins on Roan Mountain." This is why you should always change your locks. In 2017, a college girl woke up from a nightmare drenched in sweat and decided to rinse off before going back to sleep. She propped her phone on a shelf, turned on some music, and then hopped in the shower. A few minutes later, she reaches for her phone to change the song, but stops suddenly. Reflected on her phone's screen was a person standing in the middle of her bathroom facing the shower. She somehow kept her composure, turned the water to scalding hot, and then ripped open the curtain and sprayed the intruder in the face. As they howled in pain, she ran past them to her kitchen to get her butcher's knife. In a panic, she can't find her knife, so she just runs out of the apartment and calls the police. The police go in and come out with a crazy-looking woman in handcuffs. One of the officers comes over to the girl and says, "She used to live here and she had copies of your keys." Then he pauses and looks down and brings up a clear evidence bag that contained her butcher's knife, and he says, "Looks like she wanted her apartment back."
I'm going to be telling you the scary story of the house I lived in elementary and middle school. It was a 3-bedroom house, 1 bedroom in the basement, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. Because I was the oldest, I got put in the bedroom in the basement. Right when we moved in, I already had creepy feelings about the house. I hated being downstairs by myself. One day I dropped a $20 bill behind my dresser. I decided to move my dresser all by myself, and behind the dresser was this door. It wasn't a normal door, it was really short and just squared. It was also glued off, so I couldn't get into it. Me and my neighbor, who were best friends, worked at it for days to get into it. We finally got it open, and inside was another room. It was almost like an underground attic. The walls were wooden, the ceiling was wooden, there was no carpet, but it smelled awful. My parents found out and they were super mad at me for opening the room. They of course put that dresser in front of that door for a reason because they knew I would explore it. But after that, things started to get weird. Stay tuned for part 2.
This is what they meant when they said, "Don't talk to strangers." In the early 1900s, a 10-year-old boy was playing in the woods when a tall man appeared and asked if he wanted to come back to his cabin for dinner. Totally caught off guard, the boy reluctantly agrees and begins walking. When they get to the cabin, the boy is relieved when he sees Paul, a family friend, sitting on the porch, so the boy happily goes inside. After they eat, the boy says thank you to the strange tall man, says bye to Paul, and then he leaves. He had only walked a few steps when he sees his family, along with Paul, running up the path towards him, frantically asking if he was okay. Confused, the boy says, "I'm just fine," and he looks at Paul and he's like, "Why didn't you tell them I was with you at the cabin?" And he points over his shoulder. Paul glances over the boy's shoulder and then narrows his eyes and says, "You were kidnapped by a cult 3 days ago. No one's seen you." Terrified, the boy turns around to look at the cabin he just came from, and it's gone. All he sees is a dark forest that stretches for miles. This is why you should never stay in sketchy motels. In 2005, a young woman on a solo road trip across the country decided to stop for the night. The first place she sees is the Mountaintop Motel. It looked pretty cheap, but she was tired, so she said good enough. The check-in guy eyed her up and down very uncomfortably and then asked her if she was traveling alone. She ignores the question, pays for her room, and then walks away with the key. When she gets inside her room and sees there are literally cockroaches in her bed, she says nope and decides to sleep in her car in the parking lot. Around 3 a.m., she wakes up to see the check-in guy using his own keys to get into the motel room she was supposed to be in. A few minutes later, he storms out and slams the door and starts walking towards her car. Terrified, she hides under her blanket as the man tries to open her car doors but can't and walks away. She speeds off and calls her friend and asks her to look up the address of Mountaintop Motel so she can give it to police. Her friend's quiet for a second and then just says, "The Mountaintop Motel closed a week ago."